ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be with you at this very fine gathering of business leaders from both the UK and India. The annual CII Conference that we hold together with CBI is very well timed. India is at a very good point in its economic trajectory, and the UK has also been experiencing vibrant recent growth, and with recent events we'll talk about later on, I'm sure, there are new opportunities that are also opening up. I'm very pleased to be a part of a very strong delegation from CII. In fact, it has so many past precedents in its CV that we should have had the past precedents meeting here instead of in Delhi. If you look at our growth trajectory at present as a country, we've been growing in the last 2 years at around 7.5%. Our projection in CII this year is that we will grow at around 8%. This increased growth projection is on the basis of a normal monsoon and everything else remaining broadly the same. And with the normal monsoon, which looks on the ground as if it is indeed happening, we expect a pickup in agricultural growth, which will then trigger that increase in growth to around 8%. The Indian economy, as you know, is driven largely by domestic consumption. Domestic consumption accounts for around 70% of our growth rate. And given that domestic consumption is so large a share of the growth drivers in the economy, that provides a degree of resilience and a degree of robustness to our growth prospects, regardless of what's happening in other parts of the world. We've also seen some growth in manufacturing, though not as much as many of us who are in the manufacturing sector would like. We're starting to see now, on the back of a normal monsoon and strong investment by the government in infrastructure in particular and in the rural economy, we're starting to see some pickup in demand. Certainly in the last 3 months we've seen a significant pickup in demand, and on the back of this pickup in demand, we would expect in CII that probably by the end of this year we will start seeing a turn also in the investment cycle by private companies, which has been subdued now for 3 or 4 years. Our own expectation is that we're really at the early decades of a long-term growth story. As an economy, we've been growing at between 6 and 7% for the last 25 years, and our expectation is that this growth will not only continue over the next 25 years, but indeed strengthen. And it needs to. We need as a country to grow at a growth rate of between 8 and 10% to include the great proportion of the population in our growth prospects. And that's really what we've found. If we look at the last 20 years, it's only when we've grown at rates of 8% plus that we have generated significant numbers of jobs each year, which have then included more and more millions in the growth achievement of the country. So I think the prospects for India are very positive going forward. The opportunities in India are huge. They are huge in every sector. They're huge in infrastructure, certainly. They're huge in manufacturing broadly. They're huge in industries that depend on consumption, in those that depend on investment. But I think we've also seen in these last 25 years the emergence of several Indian companies, many of which are represented in this room. Many Indian companies that have the aspiration of being multinationals with Indian roots. And these companies are now increasingly active internationally. They're establishing offices and a presence internationally, and this is true no more so than in the UK. We've seen in the last few years a very strong investment by Indian companies in the UK, and indeed I think now it's become an increasingly bilateral relationship in investment as well. India is, I believe, one of the top 3 investors last year in FDI in the UK, and India invests more in the UK than in the rest of the EU combined. So one of the things that's striking about this relationship is that India and the UK are actually more important to each other as investment destinations than as trading partners. And that, to me, is a rather interesting thing. Normally, investment follows the establishment of a strong trading relationship. In the case of India and the UK, it seems to indeed be the other way around, that there is more investment taking place in each other's economies than trade. There's significant trade and significant growth happening on the trade front too, but the investment relationship seems to be particularly robust. I wondered why that was, and I was trying to figure it out. And I think it has a lot to do with comfort with each other's economic systems, comfort with establishing and running operations in each other's countries under a similar legal system, comfort, obviously, of language, comfort with sports, and from what I hear, comfort increasingly with common film stars that we admire. All of this is going to continue regardless of what changes in Britain's relationship with the EU. We've seen the India-UK relationship is going to sustain, and it's going to sustain with or without the British-EU relationship. And on behalf of CII, we would only emphasize our own support for strengthening India's investment and trade ties with the UK on a long-term basis. You know, I suppose you're, as a UK audience, you're all sick of hearing comments about Brexit, but how can one resist? It seems to me that at present what we are reading in the papers are a classic illustration of what happens after either a bereavement or a divorce. You know, you go through a sequence of emotions that starts with denial, moves on to grief, then moves on to anger, and I think we're hearing and seeing all of those emotions in play very significantly in the press, in interviews by people on television and so on. But as you all know, after these somewhat negative emotions of denial, grief, and anger comes acceptance, and I think it's only a matter of weeks before we reach that stage of acceptance in the UK, and then people start coming together to figure out how do we now make the best of where we are in the relationship. And what I thought I'd end with is some suggestions on how one can make the best of that relationship from an Indo-UK perspective. So first of all, India and the EU has been negotiating a free trade agreement for many years. I can't remember how many years, but I've been hearing about it for a long time. I think 7 years, but longer than 7 years. 2007, so 9 years. So we've been negotiating this free trade agreement for a very long time. And the agreement has been stuck on a couple of areas where there are particular Indian concerns. In particular, the import of wine and cars, and I think the big opportunity is for India to export apparel to the UK, so to the EU. So I think if one looks then at the prospects of an Indo-UK free trade agreement, which the UK would be free to negotiate post the EU. Many of the issues that come in the way would actually go away. We're not very concerned about imports of wine from the UK. The import of cars from the UK is also fine because many of them are made by Indian-owned companies. And the opportunity for exporting apparel and garments to the UK is one that can create millions of jobs in India. So it seems like an agreement that would be almost made in heaven. Second, there are significant opportunities in deepening our ties in technology and in working with the universities, and that's why, Minister, it's so good to both interact with you and to have you with us this morning. There are major opportunities for Indian companies to use UK universities and the deep research strengths that they have for widespread product development, widespread developments that can enhance our own capabilities in proprietary technology, that can enhance our own capabilities in deepening our knowledge bases such that we can go around the world more aggressively. And there's a particular need, I think, to establish closer ties within the design community in the UK and Indian companies again. The UK is one of the world leaders in design. It's had for many decades now a very vibrant and strong design teaching and consulting program. And in India, while our design programs have been growing rapidly, we suffer from a serious shortage of trained design faculty, for example, and our design infrastructure is actually very thin on the ground. It needs to be much thicker and much more robust in the coming decades to really support the kind of ambitions that we have in our firms. So I see really exciting times ahead for new collaborations as we work between India and the UK, as we deepen our relationships and get into new functional ways of working with each other. And I think the India-UK relationship will only thrive and prosper in the decades ahead. Thank you.